Don't settle for bad socks. Get comfort and grip at an affordable price with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Choose from 18 different colors at puregripsocks.com.
Inside this box are a very special pair of Nike football boots that are back 11 years later exactly as they were. Even the box is special in two-tone black and yellow, big Nike swoosh in white on the front, some perforations to match the upper in this little section, some distinctive design elements from the boots themselves, the CTR360 logo for those that care to see the box tag. There it is, and then open up the lid and you'll find some very familiar branding, CTR360 on the paper, and then finally pull that paper up and what do we have here? An exact one-to-one remake of the OG CTR360 Maestri 3. And do keep in mind that this is a special edition release from Nike. They never provided any specific production numbers, but I can only assume that they didn't make enough. These are likely to sell out on the day of release, which is the same day this video will be going live. So if you are interested in getting a pair, if there are any still available, check out the first link down below. They will all be linked there. And if you do manage to get your hands on a pair, the retail price for the remake is $250, which isn't crazy considering some of the $350 plus remakes that we've seen from other brands. Nonetheless, that is still $40 more than an OG pair of Maestri 3s would have gone for in 2012. But again, considering the price of boots these days, $250, not that it's inexpensive, but I think it could have been a lot more. However, what sets these remakes apart from basically any remake to come out in the last 10 years or so is that these are genuinely one-to-one, meaning that there is no difference that I can find with the new pair compared to an OG. And unfortunately, I don't have an FG pair in the exact yellow and black launch colorway, but I do have them here in all red, and comparing it to, again, an original pair, there is not one difference that I can distinguish. With colorways, there were certain variations in tongue materials, this having that chrome finish, and colorways did vary in terms of heel liner, this having kind of that microfiber suede versus the synthetic leather on this one. The suede ones I thought were more comfortable, but aside from those differences that are purely down to colorway, there is no difference at all, and that's really unusual because we have seen very close remakes from Nike in the past. The T90 Laser 1 would be a very notable remake. However, those didn't feature the original sole plate. Instead, they just used the sole plate from the Hypervenom 3. However, you'll notice on this CTR360 Maestri sole plate, it is identical to what was used on the OG. This is legitimately just a re-release of an 11-year-old football boot. And it's down to every last detail, even the insole, which honestly, it's one of those details that almost doesn't matter. You can see on the OG pair, synthetic leather liner on the surface, perforations or kind of like a texturing in the forefoot, and then it's a solid yellow foam with some perforations and these little kind of flex grooves. Pull out the insole of the remake and you'll find that it is exactly the same material, exactly the same texturing, and exactly the same foam. As for the boots themselves, and I guess what's interesting about the timing of this release is it comes out right after Nike unveiled the Nike Tiempo Legend 10, which, as you guys know, is no longer going to be made from kangaroo leather or natural leather at all for that matter. It's going full synthetic, and effectively what the CTR360 line was when it first launched was obviously the first of its kind in terms of being a quote-unquote control boot, but it was an alternative to the Nike Tiempo, where if you wanted that natural leather, you had that option, but if you wanted something that had the benefits of synthetic, as Nike pitched it, this was available with Kangalite as an upper, a synthetic material designed to mimic the feel of natural kangaroo leather, which effectively is what Nike is now reintroducing on the Tiempo. With the downside of that being, of course, that we are no longer going to have a kangaroo leather option, which I think really puts into perspective the so-called progress that Nike is making with the Legend 10, in that it's effectively something that they were already doing 11 years ago, and honestly even further back if we go to the Maestri 1, which now kind of calls into question, at least in my mind, is the Legend 10 going to be as good as the 11-year-old Maestri 3? Because as far as I'm concerned, this is genuinely one of Nike's best football boots ever. As far as tech is concerned, despite being 11 years old, it's aged pretty well, and I don't think looks at all or feels at all like an old pair of football boots. This introduced Kangalite 2.0, which was a new take on Kangalite, basically removing the memory foam pods or inserts that you had on the lateral side and going for something that was a little bit thinner, arguably a little bit softer, and then just had this micro texturing on the surface to bead away water, because one of the main features of this Maestri 3 model was Nike's, at the time, brand new ACC all conditions control technology. I've made fun of it a lot over the years, but this was the football boot to introduce it. And honestly, ACC tech on the Maestri 3 was and is legit. When you feel or run your finger along the surface of the upper, it has this slight grittiness to it, and on the ball, whether it's dry or wet, there is definitely a sensation of additional grip that past Nike models simply did not have, and it became a very successful feature, something that they would eventually roll out on all their other lines. And initially, everything with ACC technology did have that same gritty texturing. It wasn't until over time where that texture went away, the additional grip went away, and now it really didn't matter whether or not a boot had ACC, because unless they actually put the logo on the upper, you'd have no way of knowing that it was actually there. Nonetheless, the additional grip from that ACC tech, along with the soft Kangalite material, honestly made for a great touch on the ball. One of the signatures of the Maestri 3 was the laces being pushed slightly to the medial side to give you this really clean surface to control the ball, which really did give you this nice feel. And also on the Maestri 3, you had these rubber elements kind of along the medial side of the foot for control and passing, and giving you that little bit of additional grip, which, as we know, rubber elements tend to do that. These were the perfect balance of grip without being overly sticky. And then there's the weight, where the Maestri 3, I think, was a little bit ahead of its time in terms of being relatively light for a football boot of this type, and I thought it'd be fun to compare the Remake to the OG pair to see if there's any weight difference at all, both in the same size 9.5 US. We'll start off with the OG pair, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.4 ounces, the equivalent of 238 grams. Remember those numbers. Change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the Remakes, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.25 ounces, the equivalent of 234 grams. So technically 4 grams lighter, but honestly, I think I could chalk that down to just manufacturing discrepancies. With that in mind, in the name of showing progress, I thought it'd also be fun to show the weight of the current, or I guess technically now being replaced, Nike Tiempo Legend 9 Elite, a full kangaroo leather upper that at the time with Kangalite, they were preaching as being a significantly lighter material. And obviously there's more than just the upper that goes into the overall weight, but in a size 9.5 US, you can see that the Legend 9 Elite weighs in at 7.45 ounces, the equivalent of 211 grams, significantly lighter than the Maestri 3, despite being a heavier natural leather material. In other words, leather isn't actually a heavier material, it's just something that Nike as well as other brands would just like you to believe. As for the sole plate and stud pattern, again, it's exactly what we would have seen on the boots back in 2012. It's a solid plastic material with actually a stiffer feel than I think a lot of people might expect. It almost has a speed boot-esque vibe in terms of how it flexes in the forefoot, but honestly still feels very solid and is remarkably thin considering how firm it feels without an issue of stud pressure. Also, the FG stud pattern, I thought this was one of their better ones over the years. Would have loved to have seen something like this on the Tiempo, and that's effectively kind of what it mirrors, but in a slightly more aggressive variation where you're going to find kind of more bladed style studs on the lateral side. Then on the medial side, the studs have a half circle rounded edge to them. So the idea here is that you have that freedom to twist and pivot, but still that bite when pushing off and changing direction. All in all though, really solid stud pattern, and again, even though it's 11 years old, it's still going to perform at a very high standard. It's pretty well just as good as anything Nike has out right now. On feet, and perhaps unsurprisingly given everything we've gone over so far, the Maestri 3 Remakes feel exactly like the OGs. There is legitimately not one thing that I can pick out that feels different from an original pair, which is really, really impressive given that these came out 11 years ago. The Kangalite upper is soft and wraps your foot really, really nicely. I love this lacing system. I think they nailed the shape of the boot, which again is very true to the original. A little bit more width through the midfoot area, a little bit more tapered through the forefoot and toe box, so something to be aware of. If you have really, really wide feet in the toes, this might not be the best overall shape for you, but again, if you had a pair back in the day, expect the exact same fit and feel on feet. And as far as sizing is concerned, it is the same as the original as well, where I wouldn't say they're quite half a size small, maybe a quarter size small. So unless you're wearing your boots right now where they are incredibly tight, then in that case, it would probably be worth it to go up half a size. But for most people, if you already have that little bit of extra space anyways, going true to size should work out just fine. So in conclusion, the Maestri 3 was great then, and it's still great now. I love the fact that it's a true one-to-one remake, and it kind of leaves the door open for Nike to do the same with other football boots that came out around the same time, perhaps even a little bit earlier. I think it'd be awesome to see more boots like this. Let me know which ones you'd like to see remade down below in the comments section. But in my opinion, this is a statement both good and bad from Nike in terms of what progress is actually defined by, because this was groundbreaking at the time. They can release it 11 years later and it's still totally viable as a pair of football boots. This would fit perfectly in Nike's current modern lineup. The question now becomes, is the Maestri 3 from 11 years ago going to be better than their new Tiempo Legend 10, which is going full synthetic, and honestly, just a risky move from them in general? In other words, are you truly making progress if the boots you were making 11 years ago are just as good, if not better, than the ones you're making now?